London student representative next, Oscar Casey. The paper question we have was from the Lisa office from the UCL. I'm afraid I won't be able to do this of that. My apologies. Okay, guys, take a deep breath. Which person would like to go first? Katie? Oscar, you have 3 minutes, and I will tell you when you're going to minutes left to go. So take a deep breath and go.
Hi everyone, I'm Rennie from the student editor. I work from Cheese Grater currently. People from UCL may know it. I believe London Student should be an investigative newspaper. Currently, the things that I think are happening, and are big things in higher education in London, are privatisation and marketisation. This is happening at UCL. Under the UCL master plan, £1.5 billion of money has been invested into Bloomsbury and Stratford, where a new campus is being built. Going on UCL's previous record, that money will come from private companies, such as arms companies, mining companies, things like that, which are setting up their own institutes. For example, the mining company BHP Billington is funding an environmental institute, BHP Billington Mining Company. Okay, so similarly, across London, other universities, I know Imperial isn't in ULU, but they are also investing a lot of money in their campus. The UCL master plan, 10 new costas are being built for UCL. Why does UCL need more costas, etc. So another big thing is tuition fees. Some postgraduates at UCL are now paying £20,000 to do a one-year course. I believe all of these things need to be investigated and scrutinised. So another big thing happening across London for students is living. Rent is extortionate. Some halls are being demolished, for example the Garden Halls, which is the University of London. They will be rebuilt and privatised, and the rents will most likely go up. Private providers are building their own halls, for example, Nilo Student Living, which is on Pentonville Road, are charging students £300 to £400 per week for a tiny flat. I believe all of these things need to be investigated by London Student in question. Secondly, stand up to prejudice. I believe London students should call out bigotry across campuses. This year, the Cheese Grater has done a lot of investigations into the UCL Tory Society, who are represented tonight. So we need to stand up to racism, we need to stand up to misogyny, we need to stand up to transphobia, ableism and everything else, all sorts of prejudice. I will have a zero tolerance policy on publishing any comment piece which is bigoted. Number 3, design. I currently think London Student looks quite busy and it's often difficult to read. I think it needs to be simplified, as does the website. And lastly, networks. I believe there is a sabbatical role to London Student, and the London Student editor needs to liaise with different student editors across London. I want to set up an annual student media conference, which will involve training, including libel training, and socialising, all sorts of things. Because I think to write a really good student newspaper, you need to have views from all across London. Everyone needs to share what they know. And lastly, I think London Student needs to have better sports coverage. So I'm off to go. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your contribution. The next person to speak to all of us is Katie. She will have 3 minutes, and then I'm going to allow a few questions. We are running out of time, so I'm going to probably take 2 or 3 in a row for the next section, if you don't mind. Katie, would you like to start now? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie. I'm a student at King's currently, and I am currently Deputy Editor at London Student. Effectively, the main thing that I want to do with London Student is just get more people involved. I think it's been quite internal this year, and there hasn't been enough outreach to other student media outlets and just generally to other students. Our demographic is absolutely massive. There are 130,000 students, and it would be particularly optimistic to think that they all read it. But I think that, you know, we can definitely increase the number that we've got for today. One of the ways in which I'm going to do that is I want to have open fortnightly meetings. So by doing this, it means that any student who either reads or writes for it can come, discuss what's been in, discuss what they think can change, and actually, if they think that anything's nice, they can maybe tell us that as well. I also want to have open office hours because I think this year there's been a level of editor anonymity so that people know the name but they don't know the face, and I think that that is a big thing. If people can come in and actually have their views heard, it gives a greater confidence in the editor themselves. As far as online goes, we are in desperate need of reorganisation of the website. It's currently, there's content on there that needs to be archived up there in case anybody actually wants to have a look to, like 2009. I also want on the website to have greater democracy on there, so things like online polls and open forums, so that people can vote on topics that they actually want to be covered, and that means that they're more likely to pick it up if they know that we're covering something which they feel is a personal issue for them. Admittedly, we've been told tonight by some men that we're not pressed, but I'm going to go with liberation issues and keep those up because I think that there are instances in university of oppression which are frankly unacceptable, and I think that by raising these issues and publishing them to our massive demographic and the readership will help greatly in greater awareness and hopefully pushing down the levels of bigotry that we do see. On that note, I also want to introduce an Islamophobia awareness month issue and disability rights issue and have a greater thing on women's rights as well. Student media kind of gets attacked by everybody, everywhere, all the time. So it's pointless for us to attack each other because we just spend time belittling each other's articles and, it doesn't get anybody anywhere. If there is a greater cross-campus network, and I know that the London Student Media Network, which is currently in the process of being set up, and there's lots of publicity for that at the minute, that's doing its best to connect all outlets of media, so not just newspapers. And it also means if something comes up that can't be covered by a certain campus because of staff-student, obligation, which is a big thing, that big issues get covered because somebody up at the top in bureaucracy goes, you can't say that about us. If you can, cross-feed your information, you get a lot more out of that, and it means that issues are going to come up that really need to. Sports, again, the coverage has been questionable. And sports it's a massive part of ULU, and fair play to anyone because I've never found a sport that I can actually play. So yeah, better sports coverage and more democracy.
Thank you, Katie. As I said, we are short of time. I next need the next officer up will be the disabled students officers on my list anyway, on my school office. So I'm going to take 3 questions in a row. It has to be to both candidates. I will give preference to people who haven't spoken before, or who haven't had the chance to speak before. I'm going to start on this side first. If you could ask a question to both candidates, please.
How have you responded as editor to the transphobic article published on, I believe, the current editor's Day Away in London Students?
Thank you. I think probably let Oscar go first because we just couldn't.
Do you mean would I have published it?
Both would you have published it, and steps, what precautions you think should be taken to that's published?
I wouldn't have published it. I don't believe in freedom of speech for the sake of saying offensive things. I believe that there are certain things that shouldn't be said in print, which are discriminatory and prejudiced, and will hurt and offend people who are vulnerable. So no, I wouldn't have published it. What was your second point? What would I stop?
What precautions would you take in the future to make sure that, for example, if it was your away day, you were away when it was going through, that such thing couldn't happen?
I think I'd just take more care over checking what was going in the newspaper that I had my name on as editor.
Thank you. Let Katie say something on this issue, please, and to this specific question. Katie,
I think that from actually being, part of the team from when that article was published, our sort of perhaps misguided way that we looked at it was this guy is standing for an elected representative, and this guy's views are insane, and we wanted to juxtapose that with the comment piece of yes. And on the yes side of the comment piece, because it was a yes no debate, the end sentence was, if you don't agree with unisex toilets, you are just plain transphobic. And then this guy's article came in. I think it could have done with a lot better editing, because there were things in there which were just plain offensive, that if we'd have taken them out, his views would have come out and people still would have questioned them. And I think that, I'm not sure whether I would have published it or not, but if I did, it would probably look very different to how it did look.
Thank you, Katie, for the answer to the question. I'm going to allow the brother in the terracotta hoodie to speak next. Sorry, my fashion sense is totally whack. You haven't asked the question, so I'm going to let you ask, but try and keep it to both people. Go.
Which section, apart from news, do you see as most important for the London student?
Do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not really a section, but it is the cultural supplement. I think on the basis that that's the thing that gets most people involved. That's the thing that most people want to write about, because if somebody's new to journalism and they're like, oh, you know what, I've just heard this amazing album, or I've been to this amazing gig, or I've just seen this film that actually I really want to write about, it's a nice little pathway into it for them, and I think once they get in, it then makes them want to write about wider issues, and I think that that's the big draw for most people, is the cultural supplement.
Thank you, Katie. Oscar, if you'd like to answer on this specific issue.
I would probably agree with Katie in that the culture section is possibly more accessible to people who maybe aren't interested in the type of investigative news that I want to do. So yeah, I would agree. Culture.
Thank you. Let's have somebody who hasn't spoken before. The UCL brother at the back who has just come in recently. I don't believe he has asked a question. Oh man. Go. Sorry to put you on the spot, but it has to be to both people if you don't mind.
In terms of any investigative work that either of you have done in the past, have you ever spoiled a source? What is your thoughts in terms of when it would be appropriate to spoil sources?
How do you mean spoil sources?
A source in terms of not taking their anonymity or anything similar.
Or
do you think that there's anything that you would ever intend to do in the future?
I still don't quite understand.
You mean it's as a risk?
Being a source that would like to be anonymous, is there ever a case where you want
I think there is a difficult one, especially for student journalists who haven't been to journalism college and don't have libel training like yourself, to know exactly where the line is. I think if I speak to someone, are you speaking about specific incidents, by the way? Okay. I think if I speak to someone and they're aware that I work for a cheese grater, and I'm asking them a question which is political related to something, I think it's fair game that I publish what they say.
Thank you. Katie, would you like to add something?
Does that answer your question?
Let Katie answer and then you can.
I mean, I think that in terms of investigative journalism, it's not my forte as it is yours. But I think that it's one of those things, you can't make a blanket term about it. You can't say, yes, I'll always, lower their anonymity, or yes, I'll always keep them anonymous. There is a time and place, and it depends on the situation, on the views of the person, and I think it's a very sort of individual case as opposed to just a blanket term.
Okay, can I have a question? Somebody hasn't spoken at all today. I'll ask questions, please. Otherwise, we really do have to move on. Otherwise, it becomes the usual suspects. Okay, you can have one to both questions. I want it to be a quick question, please, and then you are afterwards, please. We go.
Both very well done. It's a bit nerve-wracking out there. What would you do about social media journalists from constituent colleges, and how would you get them to work together?
I think that I spoke to one of the VPs for communication about this, and she said that basically it was that thing of not being strangers is the main thing, and you need to set these kind of ground rules of not just attacking each other for the sake of making your own work look good. And I think that once you've you need to meet these people, you need to have face-to-face interactions, because otherwise nobody's going to believe you. Nobody's going to take your word for it if you go there and you stand and you're like, and if you send an email and you're like, oh, can I just ask about how you run your paper, but I'm going to be really nice. And I think it is that thing of you need to set up, you need to have just basic contact with them and then get them together, organise meetings and make it so that actually everybody profits from it, and it then raises the bar of student media in general.
Thank you. Oscar?
Yeah, I would say you need to have a relationship with people that write newspapers. When I've been going around to different colleges to try and get support for my campaign, I met the editor of the QM paper, which is called Q Messenger, her name's Izzy, and she said, initially when I said we support me, she said, why would I support you? You're in competition with us. The London student is in competition with our newspaper. And I said, well, it's not really. I think if all of the papers from across London were to share information and to share skills, and London student were to support editors of papers, I think they could work really well together. I don't believe that's been happening this year because, well, for a number of reasons, but I don't think there's a communication between the editors of college newspapers and the London Student Editor. Furthermore, I want to, as I said before, I want to hold a student media conference, which will involve, because a lot of student newspapers are saying, we want training, we want libel training, stuff like that. An organisation that offers that is the NEJ, and actually all journalists, they offer it for free often. We can have a conference which has libel training, training on writing, all sorts of things. And I think that will be a really good start for a good relationship between all these different editors.
Thank you for your answer. This is the last question. I need somebody who hasn't asked a question at all. If there's somebody in the room, you can have a go. Okay, I believe you've been quite consistent. It has to be to both candidates, and this is the last question I'll allow.
Yeah,
Go for it.
it's totally
You stand up, throw your voice. Go for it. Okay. Go.
So my question, my understanding is that this year, the London students had a lot of kind of roving people involved who were kind of trying to fill lots of different roles. My question is, it's laudable that you guys want to bring in more people, and I'm sure you both where they end up doing a job. But what do you think you kind of structure you need to have in terms of London students in order that you have designated roles that can fill things like subbies, that kind of thing?
Thank you. Shall we have Katie first, please?
Yeah, I think that it's a very sort of, like London Student has quite currently a sort of slightly anonymous structure. So you have the editor and then say the ed board of people like the head of production, and then you have the section editors, and then they have their sources of writers. Now the links between the sources of writers and the editor are often particularly flimsy, like it's possible to see a name and have no idea who that person is. I think that in order to get more people involved and keep them involved, people need to feel like what they're doing actually matters. And I know that sounds completely ridiculous and completely arbitrary, but if you're writing but you've never met the editor, you're like, well, if I ever want to go somewhere and get a reference for, like I've done all this journalistic work, but it would probably look better if it was from the editor. They're not gonna want to do that. They're not gonna feel like they're getting anything out of it. It is just that thing of keeping up communications and talking to people like they're people, not articles. I think that's the big thing.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask us to reply in a minute. Could I please have the people disabled post get ready to come to the if you step forward, please don't be shy. This post, I believe, is either disabled students officer or RON, which is three open nominations. So there's only going to be one speech. I will give the person 3 minutes in a second. If you don't mind getting ready. Oscar, sorry for the delay.
So, Will, your question was specifically on the newspaper this year.
What would you do in terms of structure?
Yes, okay, well, essentially the problem this year has been, I've spoken to a lot of people who have tried to submit content to London Student this year, and one of the main things they've said is, I haven't had constructive feedback when my article has not been printed. The editor needs to do that. They need to encourage people to keep writing. Second of all, at the beginning of the year, the current editor didn't properly advertise all of the editorial positions. There was no proper interview going on. Loads of people want to write for London Student, and that was shown at the beginning of the year when people said at Senate, why haven't you advertised these positions? Everyone's been saying to us, we want to write for London Student. So basically, there needs to be a good interview process at the beginning, and there needs to be good feedback for writers. And I believe that's how you get more people writing for it.
Thank you, Oscar. And also thank you, Katie. Give it up for both of them.